Hi everyone, I'm live. Sorry I'm a bit late. I'm gonna wait until some people join. But I know how it is when the video is recorded, then there's this silence at the end, so I'm just gonna start chatting. Right, so today we're talking about different approaches and techniques for training pronunciation, for teaching and learning pronunciation. And while you're joining, guys, could you just, I know that some of you also teach pronunciation, so I would be curious to see if you just send a like or maybe a plus or an emoji, if you also teach pronunciation. I'm curious to know if any of you do that, maybe just a little bit, just starting. Thank you for joining, welcome. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the approach that I was taught in when I was at uni. Because I think like this is where it started, but then over the years when I started teaching pronunciation myself, I look back and I realized that I'm using a completely different approach, and some of the things that I was taught initially seem a bit odd to me. Now, I'm not here to dish the dirt on my university or the department that I studied in, but I think you might find it interesting just to know how different it was. Anyone teaching pronunciation? Let me know. So I studied at Lomonosov Moscow State University at an English department that was like English Philology, Romgerm, like I don't know if in English you say that, Romano-Germanska Philologia. And I studied for 5 years from 2009 to 2014. And the first year was a very intense year of phonetics. Like we studied phonetics 3 times a week, 2 paired classes. So that was an immense amount of phonetics. And it was just basically like our base camp. It was our main classroom, and we were always going on like practicing everything that we were learning. And let me just start with loads of positive things about this place. It gave us this immense foundation of knowledge about phonetics, but also, you know, in general about English, because the professors that we had, they were amazing, passionate professionals, and they just basically ignited this, you know, this nerdiness in us and also the passion. And for example, they encouraged us to do things like check every word in the dictionary, not just the pronunciation but also the usage, and they were really pushing us to learn collocations, you know, this kind of thing, although the focus of the lessons was phonetics. They taught us all the theory, everything was in English, all the phonetic lingo, all the terms, so it was really, really useful and important. At the same time, they were strict and demanding, which could also be seen as a plus. So all of that that encouragement to be very meticulous and detailed about your studies came from there. And I would say it was a lot like carrot and stick kind of approach. There was a lot of that strictness, but also like humor and encouragement, and they were nice, really nice professors. We had 3 teachers at the same time, and sometimes they were giving a class like together, joint, and they were all like mature senior ladies. Right, so I guess I should move on to the points that go into more detail about how we were taught and address those controversial aspects that I've mentioned. So the way we were taught is that from the very start, they introduced all of the sounds, like the classification of all the consonants, all the vowels, and how you say them. And we were supposed to, and I still have the notes, let me just show you quickly. I scanned them. And you can see like my handwriting there, and all the notes, like all the kind of phenomena from phonetics, like on the very first class, like cessation of I misspelled cessation of phonation, words juncture, then S, samый сильный звук при st уже нет аспирации. Like we were noting down everything was so new and so difficult, you know, like it was overwhelming. And we studied all of the sounds, and then we had to keep all of that in mind right away, like from the very beginning, as we were working with the target texts. Target texts was basically a version of shadowing that we did, which was based on pretty long extracts that we were given, and sometimes we were given the model by the professors, and sometimes it was some video or audio that we used. And like, imagine that, picture this, we had to transcribe the whole text, it could be a few pages long, and then practice the whole thing. It's not like you take one sound, for example, you take I don't know, the key vowel, and you drill it, you understand how to say it, you practice, and then you, I don't know, you can, and you will still struggle to keep it in mind, one sound in the text. Now imagine having all of the like 12 vowels and all the consonants and all the phenomena and rhythm and intonation all given it, like thrown at you from the very beginning, and then you have to keep all of that in mind while working with the text. Now that was a lot, and it was really, really hard. And if you ask me, this is one of the aspects that I find controversial, because like the brain just doesn't work that way, and you can't expect the person to receive the information and then apply it in, you know, all at once. So that was the way it was. And another surprising detail that I remembered, and I checked in my notes, is that the vowels had numbers. Like, as we were talking about the vowels, we didn't use the names like, I don't know, fleas, dress, cat, trap, whatever. We used numbers. And so every vowel had a particular number assigned to it. I'm not sure why it was so important, or why that was the approach they chose, but basically, for example, if you think about the trap vowel, I call it the cat vowel. Some people call it legushka in Russian, because I guess it's the shape of the symbol, and it was number 4, like for no particular reason, and you had to go to say like, oh, we have number 4 here, which was a little bit confusing. Guys, as usual, if you have any questions or comments, you can like feel free to leave the messages, but maybe if it's about something else that I'm not talking about now, it's better to ask the question at the end, but whatever. Right, so the vowels had numbers. And another thing we did, after we had drilled those texts so that everyone at the department hated us, the English group, we had to present, of course we learned them by heart, and then we had to present them in front of the whole class. And as you can imagine, that's quite a lot of stress, and it was hard. And then another thing we did is that the students who were in the audience, like not presenting, they had to listen, take notes, and then give feedback to their mates. Like, we had to give feedback to each other, which I think is it's great practice, because we were also taught how to give feedback, that you can't just focus on the negatives, you have to say something positive. But still, all in all, I think that presenting in front of 30 people, okay, maybe 20, we were like, anyway, I'm going into too many detail, but that's like quite a lot of stress. And talking about the psychological atmosphere, I mentioned that it was a lot of like carrot and stick methods. And when it was stick, it hit hard. So sometimes it was really humiliating. Sometimes it was like a lot of criticism and not enough understanding. I don't know, I was one of the best. But there were girls or guys who didn't manage that well, and it was like painful to see that they really criticized quite a lot. I mean, our professors criticized the students. And I don't know if it always was like that with them, but we were the first year that didn't take this separate assessment to get into Moscow State University. And we just entered with the YEGA state exam results, and our professors really had a bias against this, and they were like, well, you are like, we're not good enough, you know, like we didn't deserve to be there. And by the end of the year they were like, oh, we love you, you're great, but it was still like this assumption that we are a bit thick, or yeah. Anyway, again, I don't mean to speak like ill of the professors and the university, but I'm just trying to be objective. There were great things, there were also things that were a bit damaging. Let me check if there was anything else I missed. Right, the confusing things. Some explanations that I remember and I revisited after some years I'm not sure I understand what they meant or why they said those things. For example, you know, like how some vowels are tense. It's definitely true. Let me just give you an example. For example, the key vowel or the goose vowel. Those vowels are tense, and I'm gonna tell you now, like the way I explain it and why they're tense is because the tongue is tense and it stays in that position, fairly high position, for some time as we hold the vowel. While we were explained that at uni, the way they said it is that you have to have tension in the glottis, which basically means like I still can't explain it, because it means basically, I don't know what, like if you think about it, we have vocal folds that come together to produce sound. Why do you have to have any tension in the glottis while saying those vowels? But they kept repeating that phrase, and it was like a mantra almost, where we had to, saying the vowel like key, we had to do Привет, бабуля. Say hi to my granny. So we had to do this, like not just saying key, whatever, but we had key. We had to do this, and that's one of the things that I find really confusing and harmful. At least, I wouldn't explain that way now, and it's just my point of view. But this is how my perception has changed. Or saying that all diphthongs are tense. Like, what are you supposed to do for the diphthongs? Like A and be super tense, or O. What is tenseness? I don't know. And a couple of examples, like more specific examples that I remember, the habits from uni, some articulation habits that I carried on with and that stuck with me. For example, while saying the sound like bird, the habit that I had is pulling the corners down. And I actually have this noted down in the textbook. I don't know if they taught us this way, or it was like a life hack that I discovered. But what I did is, for example, to say the word bird or early, I said bird, early. So stretching the corners down and kind of revealing the lower teeth, which is completely useless. But I couldn't help it. I kept saying it this way, and stuff like that. A little confusing and kind of pointless, which was going on. And finally, the accent that we were taught, standard RP, was quite old-fashioned and posh because of the way the professors spoke. They were amazing. Like, they spoke like they were English ladies, but this was quite old. And the models for shadowing for the texts that they picked were also, I guess, people that they could relate to, but we young girls, we couldn't. And as a result, I think in my head it was like we didn't have a choice. Like, it wasn't much of a choice which accent to study, right? So in the end, when the first year of phonetics was over, I was like, whew, now I can relax a bit. And my accent had changed, but I don't know, I just started picking up American features because it seemed much more relatable. Because for me, England and this kind of accent was all about lords and sirs and anything that I didn't find that appealing. And I had no idea how modern English sounded. Back then, YouTube was not a thing. It's so popular, and I never really developed any interest in that. So, and then if you don't know my story, so like 5 years at uni, 1 year of phonetics, and then 5 years at uni, more or less maybe sticking with this RP, and then for 8 years I spoke with a more international accent, which I thought was, I'm more American now, but in the end it was like a mix. Anyway, so the accent didn't stick, and I think like partially it was because of this, because I couldn't relate to it, and the models like that they chose, and then it was just like a bit uncomfortable maybe because of all these things, and and that's it. So this was the approach at uni. Let me know if you have any questions, and this is how the first year went by. When I started teaching pronunciation, which is quite some time after that, when I moved to London, it was in 2019, and I was still starting to get back to the RP that I once studied, I regained my interest, and I was trying to recover it by myself. And I had a student who said, you know what, I want to learn pronunciation. You seem to have a nice pronunciation, and like, can you teach me? And I'm like, sure, because I was so excited about it. It was my passion. But I used the only method that I knew, and I started teaching using the same method that we were taught at uni. So picture this, a guy who was like an IT engineer. He wasn't even a teacher or anything like this. And he says, oh, teach me pronunciation. And I'm like, sure, let's take this text, like a TED talk, a big text, because I was used to that. Not the whole thing, of course, but like quite a long extract. And let's just learn all of the sounds. I literally explained all of the vowels at once to him. We talked a bit about how to say them, and then it said, okay, great, now let's take the text and transcribe it. And I was like, why is it so hard? Like, you see, you can check in the dictionary whatever you don't know. And then let's just practice the whole text. Also, of course, with the rhythm and intonation and everything. And I was surprised. No, I mean, I have no idea what I was thinking. Now I'm like, this is horrible. This is impossible to learn this way. Just throwing someone in at the deep end and saying, you can do that. What's so hard about it? But that's the way I was taught. And then gradually I started realizing that things have to be taken step by step, and you have to explain things sound by sound and give the brain the time to adjust and do like a lot of drilling and repetitions, and only then gradually you can move on to the next level. But yeah, so I started questioning things and experimenting, and now the approach that I apply when teaching one-on-one lessons and on the course is that as adults, unless you're very talented, it's very hard to just imitate what you hear or pick up an accent. So in general, I think for adults, it's really important to become more aware about how you say things and to learn to feel and control your organs of speech. Like, you know, one of the first questions that I ask my students when we start having lessons is like, giving like a random sound, any sound, maybe even a Russian sound, and asking, where do you feel the tongue? And the answer is always the same, in the center, because that's how far we can go. Like how far we feel the tongue. It's just somewhere in the mouth. Why are you asking me, stupid? It's in the center. But then like we learn to feel, what does it mean when the tongue is in the center? How does it move to the front, to the back? And what role do the jaw and lips play? Because it's all a system. Anyway, so explaining and understanding the logic, becoming more aware, and going step by step is basically my approach now. And yeah, so I'm ready to move on to the next point of my discussion, which is going to be about the question whether or not we have to exaggerate when practicing pronunciation. Let me know if you have any questions about the approach from uni or the approach in my lessons, but that's basically a little bit of an introductory part that I wanted to leave here. And then, so the second point that I wanted to address is, do we have to exaggerate? So it's going to be something more practical. Give me a second. And this point, I think it's something that it has inspired the whole live stream about this. It came from a current student of mine. Well, I don't want to reveal too many details, but basically he came after a year of studying pronunciation with another teacher, and it did not affect his spontaneous speech much. Like, he knew some theory, but he couldn't connect it with the way he was talking. And one of the things he told me that his previous teacher told him, which I'm not judging, I'm just saying, like, this is the fact, is she said that you have to exaggerate the sounds, and then, like, after a while, they'll just fall into place. And I think it's quite a common idea that you just have to exaggerate it first, and then it will become natural by itself. So I wanted to comment on that and give him my take on this. Again, just my opinion. So I think that blind exaggeration, meaning that you're just like trying to, I don't know, to make everything bigger, right? Make everything more grotesque, is not automatically going to translate into your natural speech. There's not going to be like, oh, and now I speak in a very relaxed and natural manner. Why not? So I feel that, and from what I saw in this guy, the student of mine, is that I think, let me give you an example of an exaggeration so that it makes more sense what I'm talking about. So for example, if we take the sound like R, like in car or can't, or this vowel, tricky one, and if we exaggerate it, you might hear it as can't. So this kind of exaggeration. And what I feel that it produces is, if you practice with this intense amount of exaggeration, then you are likely to dissociate yourself while practicing and your normal self when speaking. Because you'll be practicing putting all in and like going, I can't speak any other way. And then you're speaking like, you can't speak like that because you don't feel that same person. And some aspects of exaggeration may make it more uncomfortable to pronounce the sound than it has to be, than it actually is. For example, taking that R sound, what I do when I exaggerate, and actually I had a reel about this a very long time ago, 3 years ago, about this myth that this R sound, it has to be very deep, and like, that's why I mentioned this kind of blind exaggeration or blind copying, that, oh, it seems very deep, it sounds very profound, so I'm just going to stick my tongue as far as I can into my throat and hope for the best, right? And so this is where it comes in. Like, if we start pushing the tongue too far into the throat, the larynx goes down and we sound like, oh, and this is too much. And so this kind of exaggeration, this kind of movement, make it more uncomfortable to say that vowel than it has to be. So I think being very clear about let me rephrase that. I also admit that some degree of exaggeration at first is important, because if you're not making enough effort to enunciate things, to produce sounds clearly, and to move your organs of speech very, explicitly, then you will just not notice. It's harder to control more minute movements than big movements. So yes, we do start with bigger movements. But at the same time, the degree, I think you have to be very specific what exactly you are making more clear. If you take the vowel like can't, you have to be focusing on lowering the tongue, lowering the front of the tongue and pulling it down and pulling it back and feeling it here, letting the jaw drop, relaxing the lips. But what you don't need to do, or just kind of try to imitate and exaggerate, is not pulling it back too much to the extent that your larynx goes down. Another example could be this E sound, the key vowel. What you might want to focus on and maybe exaggerate slightly is making sure that the tongue is at the front and is going up and it's pressing into the side teeth, like key, key, key. What you smile while you do that. You leave some space between the teeth while you do that. But what you don't want to do is just blindly stretch your lips as much as you can and like be in that key. That's not going to help. This kind of exaggeration is blind and useless and maybe even harmful and making things more uncomfortable than they have to be. So, to summarize this question about whether or not we have to exaggerate, I would say some stepping out of the comfort zone, yes, it's important. You have to force yourself to maybe make movements that feel a bit odd. Enunciating sounds, producing them very clearly, especially at the start, yes. But exaggerating to the point of discomfort, no. So that's my take on this. Let me know if you have any questions or you have a different opinion or different experience. Let me know. And I think, yeah, nobody's asking any questions, so we're moving very quickly. I hope you're still interested in what I'm saying. And the last bit, I think, is going to be, the last section is going to be the longest. It's going to be about shadowing. And I'm going to show you some videos, some models to illustrate some points that I want to make. Right, so shadowing is like a much hyped technique in pronunciation training, and almost like a panacea, yeah, like the remedy. Just do that and then you'll improve. So thank you, Tanya. Right, so is it useful to do shadowing? Personally, I don't think it's like some kind of a must-do instrument or a universal tool, magic pill or anything. But it's a fun instrument if you know how to use it. It's just a fun way of, yeah, practicing pronunciation. And right, so of course, why not? I think I have confessed it before that I hadn't really done a lot of shadowing when I was just on my, at the beginning of my, like the main portion of my journey, because I don't know, I was just too lazy to sit down to do the transcription and everything, but I was always listening, and like whenever I had a chance, I was listening to English speech, and I was pausing, analysing how it looked, and kind of repeating. So I was doing like micro shadowing at any point, any opportunity that presented itself. So yeah, that's my take on this. However, it's useless without without proper knowledge and training, because and I see this happening quite often, even in cases when sometimes people that teach pronunciation post their attempts. No, okay, they know what they do, but like the idea is that I'm trying to get across is that the brain can't hear something that it doesn't know, and it can't register that something is different. And so if you haven't studied sounds, intonation, linking, rhythm, whatever, you will just hear what you want to hear, what your brain is ready for. And that would mean that if you try to repeat something without any background training or without any analysis, then you will repeat, and maybe it will sound the same to you, but it will not be the same. What I was trying to say, like sometimes I see videos where I notice that the intonation is different, but the person is saying, here we have a rise, and then they do in fact a fall or something like this. You know, this kind of things, they can be very subtle, and definitely it takes time to do like the training to be able to notice them, to register them, or to have some kind of guidance. Let me read the comment. Shadowing, in my opinion, is a good one to recognize the sounds you've already learned. Absolutely. And I wanted to say that it's definitely first and foremost a tool that you can use to recognize what you have already learned, the sounds and the features. You see that, oh, this is really how it happens, and then you train your ear and your skills of reproducing that, what you hear and what you recognize. Another comment. How would you practice the rhythm of speech? Those tiny changes in intonation and stress are difficult to pick up, let alone imitate. Okay, that's a good question. Let me just finish I think I finished my thought about this kind of shadowing is useless only if you have the training. So about rhythm, well, how would you practice those tiny changes? The same way, I think, well, no specific strategy to practice rhythm, but you have to know what's going on, like how you stress things. When we stress words, syllables, we usually go up in pitch, we say them more clearly, louder, and more slowly. When we unstress things, we say them lower pitch, faster, quieter, and they're reduced, so they're pronounced more like less clearly, so they stick together, things fall out. So firstly, I think you should not try to, if it's difficult, if you struggle, then you should not try and do that on the same level with the same speed as, I don't know, your model, the native speaker who's been doing this for 30 plus years, their entire life. And instead, if you take a piece and slow it down, you will notice that the overall pace is slow, but you can still see that you can still hear the reduction. Like if you slow down something like, I don't know, oh, it's gonna be so fun to see you, whatever, and you take this, it's gonna be, and you slow it down, it's gonna be like, it's gonna be, so like getting to the bottom of what exactly is going on that helps the person to slow down, to speed up that way, is a must, and then just gradually picking up speed from there. Right, so shall we talk about how to choose a shadowing model? Would you like to leave your comment about what we should rely on while choosing a shadowing model? You're very welcome. Right, so if anyone wants to write down your options, I'll be happy to see them. And I think the most common answer, I feel so smart today, like wearing my glasses. I don't know, gives me the extra expert vibe, doesn't it? Right, so how to choose a shadowing model. The most common strategy that I've seen and I've heard is the idea that you have to choose the voice that is similar to yours. What it means is like high voice, low voice, yeah, the pitch, whatever. So would you agree that that's the most common approach to think about the shadowing model? Send me a like if you do. Don't see any. Okay. Thank you. One person sent a like. Okay, here we go. So, yes. Personal preference firstly. Tatiana wrote, on your personal preference firstly, who you like, the way she or he sounds. Oh, totally. Like the way you feel about a person and how you perceive them definitely matters, because some people are just, I hate this girl, I'm not gonna shadow her, obviously. So yeah, talking about the voice, I would say that it could help if the voice is closer to your normal regular pitch, but that shouldn't be the only or the decisive factor for choosing a model, because every voice, every timbre is unique. So of course some voices are more similar than others, but what we are copying is not the voice, it's intonation and sounds and rhythm and linking. So trying to search like, whose voice is similar to mine, it should not be your priority. Besides, you can still copy the same melody, the same intonation as the model you are shadowing, but in a different key, so with a different instrument. Like you can play the same melody using different instruments, like different strings, and that's exactly what it is. We have different instruments. Our vocal tract and the vocal folds in particular, they can be different size, different shape, and that's what determines the quality of the voice that we have. And so copying somebody's intonation can be done with any voice. It could be a bit harder maybe to adjust, but it can be done. And besides, you can develop your voice to take, like your voice range, to take higher or lower notes, something that you're not used to doing. But again, that depends more on the melody itself, the intonation, than the voice, specific voice that of a model that you're copying. Let me know if that makes sense or it's confusing. So instead of the voice, what I feel that matters more, and here we're going to look at some videos of the people that I selected to illustrate. Right, so what I feel that matters more is obviously the accent itself. Okay, even if we take the British accent, standard Southern British, there can still be variation. You know, some people sound a bit more standard, a bit more posh, and others sound more like more Cockney, more estuary, you know, this kind of modern vibe. And they can just use different features. Like some people may use more glottal stops than others, and this also is something that you kind of have to consider. So the accent itself, let me show you an example, the examples. So the first person, if we take this lady over here, Kate Middleton, let me just check the volume. Oh, the accent her accent is, she's a like part of royal family, so her accent is quite posh, standard, right? So let's just give it a quick listen. Yep.
The next question is, what was the best part in the development of the early years project? That, I think, has to be going around the nation when we launched the survey, and I got to meet loads of amazing families, loads of amazing parents, hearing firsthand.
It may be tricky, you know, especially if you're not very experienced. It can be tricky to tell any difference between this and what we're going to hear. And I might even struggle to explain some features, like the way she said launch, and this ch was a bit odd, and I'm not sure what feature that is, because I'm not, I don't speak like that. But for example, loads, like the way she says loads is like not using her lips at all, like loads, and it's like more old-fashioned, more posh. Some people prefer that, and of course it's an amazing model, she speaks beautifully, but let's take a look at another example, and that would be Dua Lipa. So listen to her speech now. And again, the voice will be different, the manner, everything, but the accent itself is also different.
How did Dua Lipa get discovered? Bit of a long story, but I'll try and like shorten it a little bit. When I was young, you know, I always wanted to make music. I started making YouTube covers and I started showing them to my friends in school. And then I used them as like a form of portfolio to like work with different producers and get...
Right. So at the beginning, did you notice how many glottal stops she used, for example?
Always wanted to make music. I started... Did Dua Lipa get discovered? Bit of a long story.
Bit of a long story, yeah. This, I'm sure Kate Middleton would say, bit of a long story, yeah, bit. So here.
But I'll try and like shorten it a little bit.
But I'd like, what to say, shorten it a little bit, yeah. Like this kind of thing, something that Kate Middleton probably wouldn't do. And each to his own. I mean, when choosing, you're like, this is my vibe, this is not my vibe, this is my accent, this is not. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. Another aspect is the manner of speaking. Well, also something that we kind of saw in this example, the manner of speaking, the energy, the vibe, whatever you call it, it can be a bit less, like it's harder to put your finger on it, and it can be very personal. It's just something how you feel, what energy is this person is emitting. What's another word? Oozing, I don't know. So for this one, let's take a look at this gorgeous girl, Emilia Clarke. So I feel like I have two extracts with her. She is super bubbly, super energetic, and she's like always speaking very emotionally. Let's just give it a quick listen.
The best piece of fashion advice I've ever been given: getting stuff tailored. So I'm 5'2". It's a problem because, like, if you buy nice clothes, they're designed for tall people. And so when I wear them, it doesn't look good. And so when I realised...
So even if she speaks like a normal person for a bit, then she can't help it. She'll make a joke, she'll laugh, she'll use like high voice and wow, and her facial expression and everything. And this is an example where she speaks alone, and there's another one where she's with Olivia Colman, and it's just like, I when I watched it, I felt drained at the end because they were like, there's too much energy, there's too much going on. So just check this out.
So I got my big Emma Bridgewater mugs, big mug, and
a big mug.
oh, I'm a big mug kind of girl.
It's gone the wrong temperature by the time it gets to the bottom.
I drink it very quick.
Oh.
And Yorkshire Gold, yes.
Well, anyway, yeah, like a lot of like jokes, laughs, and whatever, just energy and being emotional, expressive. If you're not like that, it's gonna be very hard to shadow her, right? Like if you are more reserved, like shy, and in general, like not just speaking English, but in general, that's your personality. Why would you have to force yourself to be like, I'm a big mug kind of girl, you know? Like that probably wouldn't be your vibe. Even though, of course, like maybe some bits of Emilia Clarke can be more like chill and calm, but in general, this is the energy, you know what I mean? And another one, I don't know, like just a random pick, is Vanessa Kirby, who's an actress, and her vibe is very different. Let me just play it and show you.
My work as an actress has definitely shaped my approach to beauty. I don't think I had one before this job, and I think because you have to test lots of different foundations for different cameras, maybe changing wigs or having certain makeup put on for characters.
So her speech is more like, grounded, maybe more feminine, elegant or whatever, yeah, and like she makes less pauses, less like ups and downs, this kind of thing. So maybe that kind of model speaks to you more, like to your personality or the way you want to come across. So that, yeah. Let me check if I have any other examples. I also thought about Carey Mulligan, who also tends to be more like calm and much less emotional than Emilia Clarke. And again, maybe those are just two extremes of a spectrum, where Emilia Clarke, Carey Mulligan, and of course they can have different moments, but in general I think like you have to listen to how you feel about being that person, because it doesn't mean we shouldn't think that every English speaking person or a British person is the same. Or another example of kind of the same contrast would be Alexa Chung, who is I'm not sure who she is, YouTuber about fashion style, this kind of thing, model. She's a model probably. So listen to this, like the way she opens up, and picture yourself, I don't know, saying this.
Hello, I'm Alexa Chung, and I'm here with Harper's Bazaar, and we're about to find out what's in my beauty bag.
So I just mean this kind of vibe. Hello, I'm Alexa Chung. Very loud, very again like big jumps, ups and downs or whatever. So I don't know. See for yourself. If you picture yourself doing that, if you feel uncomfortable like doing this, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should find a person who will, be closer to your vibe. Tanya is writing, but I think for the sake of learning, it's great to listen to various accents. The more features you can hear, the better, and more things you will understand from any native speaker. Of course, yes. Listening to a variety of accents is great. Analysing them, digging down to details like, what's different? Of course. Maybe even practicing and repeating for the sake of experimenting and developing your personality. But I feel just like this should be kept in mind or done consciously, because if you feel like, I'm not nailing this, I'm not nailing the energy, the way Emilia Clarke speaks, and I'm useless. So it shouldn't be this approach that it must be any British person that you choose, that you must be the same, this kind of idea. Right, so, or for example, Keira Knightley, again, like the opposite, more calm and, aristocratic energy or whatever.
The best piece of beauty advice that I've ever been given is less is more. My approach to beauty has changed over time. I definitely wear a lot.
So again, like more like the Vanessa Kirby kind of style, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, it's and there's not much urgency to categorize and say like label whatever. But I'm just kind of drawing your attention to the fact that there can be different styles and manners and vibes, and people can be different also at different points of time. Maybe you can try like one day this, one day that. Yeah. So, but I think it's important. And let me maybe mention a couple more. I'm not going to show them, but mention a couple more points, personalities that you think of. Again, Olivia Colman that we mentioned before, she's also like making lots of jokes. I'm like, no, like quite energetic. And on the other hand, I don't know, Kate Winslet is more grounded, more serious, maybe, like assertive. And so that kind of considerations could be, who do I want to be today? In terms of the guys, obviously I've done less of that, but for example, if you take Prince Harry and the way he talks, and Tom Hardy, in terms of the accent and in terms of the vibe, very different people. And let me just give you the personal example. For me, like who I copied and who I don't feel like suits me, and I don't really feel like maybe trying to copy her. So that would be Zoe Sugg is someone who I don't think that she suits me. I can't. How do you say this? Like I can't relate to her, identify with her. So English is a great girl, but if I try to copy her, I'll feel like I'm being too fake. So, for example, this kind of vibe, just her saying hello.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another vlog. This one is going to be very Halloweeny. It's
also, of course, the voice quality, like the way her voice is quite like that, yeah. And I don't know, never felt tempted. So I don't have anything against her, but I never felt tempted to copy her. And on the other hand, my all-time favorite model, just because I ended up watching her vlogs all the time, is a YouTuber, Leah Hatzakis, and her vibe really appeals to me, and I feel like I could really sound like that if I was English.
Hello my friends, hello everybody. Welcome to my little monthly catch-up. It's November, it's the last day of November as you watch this.
So again, maybe it has to do something with the timbre of the voice that I find more appealing, but in general the manner, I think you can tell something a bit more elusive, and like it's, yeah, whether you love it or hate it. So let me know if there's any other questions or comments on that, and let's carry on. And the third point, so I mentioned what matters, I feel, to me personally, in my opinion, when choosing a shadowing model is the accent itself, the variety of British, even if it's standard Southern British still. The manner of speaking or the energy or the vibe, it's all the same point, and you saw those examples that I feel like really make that point. And finally, the third point, suspense, is their person or their personality, whatever you want to call it. It's like, I feel like you have to be interested, more or less. Of course it depends. If it's just like a one-time thing, one night shadowing, it doesn't matter. But if you kind of want to have a model that you really look up to and you want to be constantly copying, thank you, then I feel that their personality should be appealing and relatable to you. So what it means is maybe their age matters. I kind of collected also a few examples of different ages. Of course, like for me, it would probably be a woman in her 30s that would be a relatable model, not just in the way she speaks and looks, but also in the kind of things that she talks about or that she's interested in. So, for example, there's, I don't know how to pronounce her name. Is it Lila Moss? So the daughter of Kate Moss is now 22. She has a lovely accent, but like maybe for young girls, like really young girls, great. But for, I don't know, for me, already not that relatable. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have Judi Dench. Dame Judi Dench is 89, and Dame. Oh my god, I'm not sure. Then we have Emma Watson in her 30s, and maybe Kate Winslet almost 50. So this kind of, I think it has to be, not has to be, I think it should be, for me personally, I feel that it should be more or less like around your age. Their interest, views, and what they care about, what they talk about. Maybe you're a feminist and you want to be like, this kind of person talks about that. Maybe you are concerned about environmental issues and this kind of person really shares those values. All right, I think I'm rambling, like it's been going on for too long. Almost done. And, for example, the aspect of whether or not they're a mum. Like people who have children and people who don't have children, I think, because, Right, moving on. The final point is, does shadowing translate into the real life, into your real speech, and what exactly does and how you make sure it does? Because in the end, the reason why we do that is not just to copy somebody, but then to own it and to make it your own. So it can translate into real life. It can convert into your pronunciation. Why? Because you basically, what you do when you do shadowing is that you learn and practice some phrases, some chunks by heart, taking into account which sounds there are, which reduction and what linking and what intonation, and you learn all that like lines of a poem or a song by heart. And if those phrases, so maybe that's another consideration for the shadowing piece, not the person, but the piece, is that it's something that is relatable to real life. It's something reusable. Because if it's, I don't know, completely super formal and you don't really speak that way, maybe you don't really need it, yeah? So, for example, and I think after drilling them and repeating them so many times, because if you have the goal of really getting it precisely, then you're bound to repeat it many times and maybe record yourself as you do. So that you repeat them so many times, and then you catch yourself realizing that you can't say them any other way. And if they are reusable, common, everyday phrases, then of course it's useful. For example, I just noted down a few phrases that I might have kind of ingrained in my mind, or just some reusable phrases from the shadowings that I broke down on my channel, Alex and Accents, which is the channel where I in the past I did regular tutorials for shadowing, and I tried to pick the extracts that would be convertible, transferable to the real life. So for example, there was one by Zoe Sugg that when she said, "It's my birthday next week, I'm gonna be 32," but it's like learning to say this phrase I'm gonna be really quickly. Of course, it's super useful, and then you could say something like, "I'm gonna be 33. I'm gonna be 33 in a couple of weeks." So this kind of thing, yeah. Or it's gonna be really fun, and it doesn't even have to be that precise intonation, but the features like reduction, rhythm, some kind of chunks that you can then reuse. It's totally possible to convert that. Then another little phrase that I remember by Leah Hatz, that is very easily reusable is, I just wanted to share that, with this particular kind of intonation. Or by Natalie Dormer, I genuinely can't remember. Very nice rhythm, and also this kind of losing the T in the middle, right? And the intonation and remember, and just all those things, they kind of fit together, and if you learn it this way, then you're likely to say it that way, and also maybe apply the same principles to other phrases that you could say, like with the word remember. I don't know. Yeah. Or another one that I catch myself saying often is based on the shadowing by Keira Knightley, where she had, you might have seen this reel, I actually took it from the reels, where she's talking about confidence. She's like, because actually, confidence is the most important thing. And saying this, it's the most important thing, I constantly repeat that this way in my classes, for example. Or something like the final example by Emily Blunt, where she's talking about her career, and she's like, so that was a bit of a game changer. Yeah, so something like this. And talking about whether or not you have to force yourself to, I don't know, make up new examples. I don't know, at uni, back to the initial point that I was talking about, the approach at uni, we did those texts, and once we've really got them memorized and kind of settled, we would create a new text about something else, about the topic, a speech based on those patterns. It was fun, it was kind of creative, but I don't think that it's absolutely necessary to sit down and create something new using those chunks. Maybe just have those chunks somewhere around yourself so that you can be reminded about how they sound. Anyway, I'm about to wrap up. If you have any questions, please, the time is now to write them down. Julia, I'm about to finish and you have just joined. Okay, so the summary would be also about how to convert this into the real life, to your spontaneous speech, is that I think it's very important to seek the opportunity to apply what you're learning or practicing. So making yourself use those. Thank you. Julia, you're throwing me off. I can't speak anymore. So try to make yourself use that phrase, right? Don't be shy it's someone else's speech, I'm not going to use it. But because this is how we learn to speak in a different way, by repeating what others have said. It's true for when we're babies, it's true for when we're adults and learning a different language. And as a teacher, I feel it's important to provide this opportunity to apply what people learn, like what my students learn in class, because normally I think when you take a course or when you take classes, you're like, well, we're just studying pronunciation, but then it's your job to go out there and practice with your colleagues, practice with your friends, and it's like you are just leaving your students to your own devices and say, you just have to practice. But it's really hard, and especially in real life when you're focused on the meaning and the content, what you're saying, and you're nervous and everything, everything just goes out of the window. So to provide this opportunity, how do I do this in classes? I try to sometimes have this kind of focused conversation. For example, we have studied the cat vowel, or the cat and egg, all those like trap and dress. What we do, I would ask a simple question, like, I don't know, the other day I asked a student, like, what was your favorite subject at school, and who was the teacher that you found inspiring, what was the worst subject, and we just talk about this, the person is sharing, and as they do, I'm trying to draw their attention to, look, you just said maths with this sound, right? Like, try to control the articulation, or things like that, where you're bridging the gap. Or this project that I'm currently running is a little mini course aimed at this. You have all this knowledge, and then you're like, who will tell me? Who will just point my attention to the sounds that I'm forgetting? And we are doing lots of that, like speaking and trying to apply those features. So that will be it. Basically, that's my point. And if you are interested in learning to do shadowing, in a smart way, in an effective way, and learn a lot of things along the way, you're most welcome to subscribe to my channel, Alex and Accents. The link is in the description, in the bio. There's a bot that you can use to just buy a one-off access. And yes, that's it. No questions, nothing. Well, thank you for joining, and I hope you learned something today. Right, so I just blabbered on the whole time. I'm just gonna wait a few more seconds until if there are any questions, and if not, you can always leave them in the comments. Anyway, thank you so much for joining, for watching, and take care. How do I end this stream? Okay, bye bye.